want to everyone know that this event is being recorded for those who could not be present today, so it can be shared with other students, faculty, and staff, so they can listen, participate, and give feedback and comments to us, and also feel supported um, by this program today.
And one more thing, of course, as the title of this town hall suggests, this is a space for students to share their frustrations, their concerns, just anything, any response they have to the current state of. So, you do have a space to speak as well, or if you just want to listen to what the students have to say, I think it would probably be very good information to have. We'll go forward with our introduction. So it's clear that we're grappling with unprecedented challenges raised by not only the COVID pandemic, but also our police brutality, racial unrest and violence, and the tragic death of George Floyd, in addition to Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and others who have died in police custody. The purpose of this forum is to give students an opportunity to share their feedback on how they are managing academically, socially, emotionally, and otherwise, and also learn new skills that can help them cope during these times.
Part of thank you, Shantae. Part of what we wanted to begin was really speaking to the fact of intergenerational or historical trauma. I actually had a question posed to me by another staff member several days ago in regards to understanding the anger that these situations, and maybe, some people may not like to hear this, but the anger surrounding George Floyd and a lot of the unrest to really help understand the anger. And a lot of it is due to historical trauma by individuals of color over the years. And the concept of intergenerational trauma was really first recognized in 1966 when psychologists began to study children and the grandchildren of people who had survived the Holocaust. And what they had found then is that researchers theorized that the effects of trauma can be really transferred from one generation to the next. This has been studied not only with the individuals of color and individuals who survived the Holocaust, but the American Indians who have survived historical trauma. The phenomenon, they defined it as known as transgenerational trauma, and when it references to a shared experience amongst a group of people, it can be called a historical trauma. It's very relevant right now, this historical trauma, and a lot of the feelings that come from that. Thousands of people, again, are taken to the streets to protest the brutal killing of George Floyd, an unarmed black man by police, only been met with tear gas, rubber bullets, and to be called thugs in a tweet by the President of the United States. This is really the only latest incidents in a legacy of racism that stretches back hundreds of years in our society and in our culture, and which is still systemic today. Our reality is we are in a reality where there's illness, unemployment. Well, hopefully today's news was great because it seemed like employment went back up for the month of May. Polluted air and water, unequal access to education, and mass incarceration compounded with the fear of being killed by one of your fellow Americans or by a mysterious and still unchecked disease has really left our society and life feeling particularly fragile in the world, particularly dire. And many are fed up. I think a lot of people are fed up. We've been home. We've been stuck in our house for the last 2 months with a virus that we can't, a mysterious virus that came out of nowhere that is really not only affecting the American population as a whole, but disproportionately individuals of color. As shown by the statistics. And due to that, there is a lot of rage that's there. And the fact what happened with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Arbery has really caused us to be angry. It's given us a time to really reflect. And at this point, we just, can't live and suffer any longer as they once felt they had to at this point. Shantae?
Yes. And before we get into the discussion, just to piggyback on a couple of things that Regina mentioned and I mentioned in the introduction, on the heels of COVID-19, there are people of color, specifically Black people, dying at disproportionate rates due to
Mhm.
COVID-19. In addition to that, we've been stuck in our homes. We've been quarantined or self-quarantined or on curfew for one reason or another. So those issues compounded with the racial unrest, those things, it's just like a kettle bomb, and it's been, probably exacerbated the social and cultural unrest that we're dealing with today. So, those are things to take into account as well. So, as we get into our discussion, it's important to identify ground rules. One, everyone gets a chance to talk. Do not talk over each other. Only one person should talk at a time. And even though this is a virtual format and that can be difficult, we're going to do our best to make sure that happens. Personal attacks, making fun of comments shared by others, or negative comments are not permitted. And this is a safe space to share information. As long as you're not commenting on hurting yourself or anyone else, this is confidential. I mean, it is being recorded, so keep that in mind. But these are the ground rules that we have set, but we also like to open it up to others and give you a voice. Are there any ground rules that you think are important to include here as well?
I think this is good. This is pretty much it. I think one thing that we should be mindful, since we are a mixed group of faculty, staff, and students today, to really be open in regards to that and to sharing, and know that students, you have several senior members of our administration here that are willing to hear your voices and concerns in regards to this pandemic, in regards to what has been happening, and in regards to this forum today, as well as faculty and staff. Yeah, you have a chance to communicate now with the student population as well.
Absolutely.
So,
So we're going to dive in with our first question. And just to give you an idea of what the format of today's discussion is going to look like, this is our first question, and we have a preset list of questions. Our questions are going to be based on what student feedback is. So we're just going to flow based on how you flow. So, how has the COVID-19 quarantine and the recent protests and the tragic death of George Floyd affected?
leave it open to everybody. I'm just going to switch screens for a second. So, anybody would like to begin? This is open to speak.
And there's a message in the chat from Student Affairs. It says, I would suggest not speaking in generalizations, but rather from your experience. And personal experience is always impactful when shared. Anyone who's going to be the first brave soul?
I'll I'll say something, Shantae. Um, Hi, thank you, Shantae and Regina, for bringing us together like this. Um, I think that just the first thing that is coming up for me is this collective grieving. Like I just feel um, like my heart is breaking, it's sinking, it's heavy. Um, just incredible grief, I think, is what's coming up for me right now. And at the same time, I feel really struck by the people power right now and the demonstrations, and not only in my neighborhood, in my borough, in my state, in my country, but around the world. Just this global solidarity. Um, So just trying to hold both of those things and giving space for grief.
Thank you, Dima. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else want to add to that? Again, this is a safe space.
I would like to echo what Dean was saying. I think
Sure.
it's thank you once again for creating this space. I think definitely we should continue to have spaces like this for us to process. It is a lot to process. I think we were first trying to figure out our lives plus work and our families, our own health, their own health, and then all of a sudden now we compound this with what's happening now with George Floyd and the protesting. And then, of course, still in the background, thinking there is still this virus out there and thinking what's going to happen next. And of course, it's very important what's happening with the protesting because hopefully that will start some change. And it's frustrating. I go through the gamut of emotions every single day of being upset, frustrated, angry that this is still continuing to go on and that people just are not understanding the message of what Black Lives Matter really means and makes it about themselves, which is even more frustrating. So just people just needing to open up their hearts and their minds and their ears to really listen to what the message is about. And it's not a message of hate in any sense at all. And I think that's the concern that they hear Black Lives Matter and they think it's a message of hate or it's racist in any way, and it's not. Um, Everyone understands that all lives matter, and everyone understands and has heard the many analogies out there trying to get people to understand. But I think it's just still a block in many people. And until we're able to create an opportunity for people to just sit down and talk and understand, so that they can learn from each other, this will continue. Unfortunately, there will be another George Floyd. There will be others after this situation, and we as a community need to figure out how to continue this type of work to work with each other within our own communities. I think we need to be strong as a community as well, because we may have others that may think the same as the opposite of what Black Lives Matter thinks. So we need to create those spaces for them to learn as well, and also create spaces for our students to process this. This is a lot for them. Think about what they're going through and their families and just the social injustices in everyday life that they're dealing with, plus now compounding this with a pandemic, compounding this now with what they're seeing out there. They want to go out there and protest. They may be fearful of going out. It's just a lot that's happening and a lot to process. So that's what I've been dealing with. And like I think what Dima is saying is that seeing that it's not just something that is happening within the States, it is across the world. It is across the world, and people are finally standing up and they're tired. They're tired. So this is definitely beyond George Floyd. This is all injustices in general. People are just tired of it, and we need to see some type of change. So this kind of thing that we're doing, this cannot stop. We have to continue doing this. We have to continue protesting. We have to continue providing, opportunities for people to process. This has to just continue on and on and on, because this kind of a situation will not stop and will not end until more of us do these types of things.
Dean Sanel, thank you very much. That was very profound, and I think really speaks to a lot of what we hear from our students. Anastasia just popped up as you were mentioned a comment in the chat, questioning for, I think, to you and to the group, what's the best way to explain that this is about human rights and not other issues such as single parent homes, government programs, and other things I've heard people say is the real problem? It's a very good question, Anastasia.
Right. It's an awesome question. And it's actually, I think my response to that is actually a response that I was going to say, give to what Dean Salnoff shared. One key word that he used was education. I think it's something that we've heard in the past in one commercial or another is knowledge is power. Education is power. And we've been protesting, and one thing that I said to a student earlier is that the revolution has many lanes. So maybe protesting isn't your lane. You might donate, or you might donate masks for the protesters, or you might be the one who's writing letters to senators and other politicians. Every revolution has its lane. The important part is that you find your lane and that you don't stop moving. Then there's a lane for people who are passionate about education. And that might be those of us who work in higher ed, who work in education. We have to find ways to educate people about human rights. Someone who's going to be, a group of people who are going to be creative, maybe start a campaign that's going to make it clear that it's not about one particular group of people mattering more than others. It's a matter of, one particular group seemingly not mattering. So we have to kind of, it's like the squeaky oil. It's the squeaky oil, squeaky wheel.
Squeaky wheel.
Wheel. We've had to squeak in order to get some kind of oil. And it hasn't been flowing, so we have to continue to squeak, that type of thing. So there has to be a group of educators. And maybe, Anastasia, maybe you're part of that group. Maybe, that's going to be your contribution to the revolution. But I think education might be the key. Something's got to give. Something's got to make it click to these people. And I'm not targeting any one, group of people, but the people who don't understand the Black Lives Matter movement and just this movement toward human rights and equal human rights. Those who don't get it, kind of drawing them closer to a sense of understanding. But thank you for that feedback.
Anastasia responds, definitely knowledge is power. And Dima thanks us for this. Anybody else have anything they want to add?
Regina, if I could,
Yes.
I wanted to add to that a little bit, if I could, just from a personal viewpoint. I have 3 young children, and it's been interesting this week. I realized we don't spend enough time teaching in the negative space when you're talking about education. It's one thing, it's the positive space to talk about how, to talk about the good things about people, and to talk about why people should have human rights, and it's why it's bad that the behavior that my 13-year-old and I are watching on the news every night, that kind of thing. The harder part, I think, and the part that it was new for me. It doesn't mean it's new information, but that was kind of a realization was, I spent an hour talking to my son about redlining, and talking about good schools versus, like, why do good schools versus bad schools even exist? Why is that a thing? Why are there good areas and bad? Like, what does that mean when we talk about that? Because it's easy to say everybody should be equal, but then immediately revert back to there's good and bad. Well, okay, so what does that mean? Where did that come from? How did that become a thing? And I think that's an area I think we would benefit generally from doing a better job of, is teaching, what are the roots of a lot of this? Like, where did this come from? It's not just, there's a lot to the, it's easy to teach my children to be good to other people. It is harder to teach my children why other people are bad to other people. And I think it's important to teach my children why other people are bad to other people, so that they understand what to avoid, not just what to go to. I think that's all that, from what I've seen, that's often been a missing piece of at least established curricular conversation. There's a lot of amazing work on all of those kinds of topics. I don't know how well it gets to children, though. I think it's too often incumbent on individuals to educate themselves, to go do the work outside the context of their formal learning experience. And I think that's the hardest part. I think it's or the biggest gap, I think, in our educational structure is we don't do a good job of teaching the history of it and why it's bad and how we got to where we're at. because we cannot fix where we're at if we do not understand where we came from. So.
Very true. Very true. Thank you. Thank you, VP Bart. Really definitely appreciate your comments. Does anybody have anything they want to add or comment or about what they've heard so far?
Yes. Hello. My name is Beto. I'm one of the adjunct professors at LaGuardia, and
Oh, welcome.
thank you. One of the things that I'm thinking about as an educator is how, because I work in the theater department, and I'm thinking about how I can amplify the stories of individuals right now. Because I think a lot about the quote of, one death is a tragedy, 1 million is a statistic, and thinking about the effectiveness of individual stories and what we're hearing. I'm not hearing a lot about the actual a lot of what is happening on the ground. I walked through my neighborhood here in Prospect Lefferts Gardens yesterday and saw multiple police officers in full military tactical gear and with assault rifles strapped to their bodies in a very peaceful, multi-generational, multiracial neighborhood. And no one's talking about that. And I don't see a lot of people talking about my friends who go to peaceful protests and are come home covered in bruises and covered in welts and are getting attacked physically by the police, who are using physical military tactics against citizens of New York City. And as of last night, have begun a process of something I can only think of as biological warfare, as they're cuddling people and putting people in immune compromised positions now through this process of mass arrest. And our students are a part of that. And my students are a part of that. I've had multiple conversations with students who are participating in these protests, who are affected by them. And I'm wondering about my culpability and my responsibility as an educator at LaGuardia and what I need to be doing beyond just teaching people how to act and what it's like to write a play, but something deeper. So I just wanted to share that that's where I'm at, that it's also both about, as someone said, my sadness and my grief of this moment, but also the very righteous rage that everyone is feeling right now and how we need to accept that and honor that and move that to action. Thank you.
Okay.
While I don't have like immediate responses, like as far as like what to do, I just want to say I respect your desire to do more than just what your description says. I think that's extremely important. It's impactful, especially in a time like this. As educators, I'm also an adjunct. As educators, I think the most impactful times are when we go above and beyond the call of duty, when we go above and beyond what we're supposed to do, like just beyond grading papers and, like you said, writing plays or writing scripts. So the mere fact that you have a passion and a desire to be there for your students beyond the Zoom classroom, I think that in and of itself is impactful, and that is what's going to drive you to find your lane in the revolution, and an impactful way to help your students. So kudos to you for that.
Yeah. I think this, it's interesting because both VP Gresh and Dean Sanov, everybody who's spoken here today, and as well as you, we're really facing the issue of teaching. This is a moment where we can help students, and students can help us understand the systemic racism that's been in our society. And I don't, it's clear that many people may not understand why there is systemic racism, why that still exists, why there's still this anger. A lot of what we're speaking here about today really speaks to our desire and our knowledge and how we are trying to impart for not only the people, our colleagues, friends, but also to our students. How do we help them understand the rage that they're feeling, where it comes from, what it's caused by? How can we, as Governor Cuomo mentioned in his speech a few days ago, how can we be productive and not allow this to occur again? What is it that we can do? How can we help our students be more proactive in challenging systemic racism? How can we have our students help bring about more laws? Again, more laws against, police brutality, more laws against discrimination in education, discrimination period, across the board. And I think as educators here, since a lot of us here today are educators and staff, you know, to bring a question, what is it that we can do? What is it that you feel you can do to help support our students through education at this time, to help them cope with the systemic racism? And students, if there are students here, please speak up. What is it you feel that you would like to learn, or what is it that you feel should be shared with other students? Help educate us as faculty and staff as well. Charis Springs actually I've mentioned to students systemic racism, and some of them don't even know what it is. It's very true. One of the reasons why I had asked the question. A lot of them don't even know what it is. A lot of students don't even understand historical trauma, hence why we introduced that today. What are some of the ways we can try to communicate this better? Anastasia mentions 2 notable points from a student perspective. Go right ahead.
Going back to what Charis was saying and what you just said about how do we get this information out there? I think it's through education. I think the only way that people are going to learn is because I think when we talk about racism or race and ethnicity, still to this day, a lot of people just are afraid to have that conversation because they don't want to be perceived in fill in the blank. So I think it's just being open and honest about the conversations and also in educating. So then if we're able to create this space, whether it's an online space or virtual space, that we continue to update this information and provide information and send people to that information so they get to learn and really push this information through the programs that we do and have these conversations. Because we can't continue, saying, okay, we're a very diverse institution, and then we just drop it there. Diversity comes also with the connections that we have. It is not just, because you see a different, colored face or a different ethnicity or a different religion in front of you. That's nice. It's good for numbers and things like that and reports. But what does that really mean? Have we had the opportunity to really dig deep to understand the cultural and ethnic implications of these people's lives and how it impacts their day-to-day interactions with everyone? So I think it's more important for us to not be fearful of having these conversations, and those that are fearful to be honest and saying, listen, I don't want to say the wrong thing me in such whatever it may be, but also just putting the information out there and constantly having this conversation. This cannot just be a one-off thing. It has to continue beyond the summer, beyond the year. And I think there are so many different committees that are out there that are doing some type of work, and hopefully they're having the same type of conversation so that hopefully moving forward, this is not just like, okay, it's Black History Month, we did this and now it's done. Now we're next, okay, and this is another month and we did this and now it's done. And it's very surface instead of really digging deep in issues and topics that affect our students, our staff, our faculty across the board every single day that they leave campus, or every single day that they're stuck inside their homes now. So I think it's important for us to continue to educate in any way, shape, or form, through social media posts, through websites, through forums, whatever it may be, so that we're defining what these things are, because a lot of the students may not know the terminology or the word, but they understand the feeling, they understand the experience. You may not be able to put it in words, though.
Thank you, Dean Sonal. Thank you. Anastasia, I think, is responding to what you're saying. She says, I have Professor Wilson, and we discussed Janet Mock, a transsexual woman, which opened a conversation for the entire class, which had a frenzy of different perspectives and opinions. It was moderated very well. The other is introducing John Leguizamo's most recent work, which is a comedy but a very real tale about a Latino AX face, but it's also immigrant families and Black families. It touches the generational struggling, and she mentions that's a great example of using the classroom for important and heated conversations. It's very true. It's very true. LaGuardia is extremely diverse. Um, and for those of you not familiar with the statistics, 41% of our student population is of Latino origin, 22% is also of African American or individuals of color, individuals of that identify as individuals of color origin, and Asian, East Indian. The gamut is there. We are a diverse institution. And as a diverse institution, it's very important for the health and our community to be able to have these conversations and to be able to have this education and not to be fearful and to know that this is a place of learning and that viewpoints and opinions are encouraged to be shared because that's how we learn. That's how we learn. We learn through the viewpoints of others. We learn from others people knowledge or lack thereof, and that's how we gain our knowledge. And I think it's very important that we have continue this conversation in every way, shape, or form here on campus, and not and to make it important for our students. Um, Shante, I don't know if you have anything to add to this, or
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. No, I think all of that is really important. And Dean Salnov said something really important about not just doing something and then leaving it there, but making it continuous and ongoing and really defining things. And a lot of students, they might not know the terminology, but they know the feeling, they know the experience. And just thinking of it from a clinical perspective, which you and I, Regina, are very familiar with, oftentimes when it comes to diagnosing something, it's not a matter of marginalizing, stigmatizing something or someone, but if you are able to label something, then you are better equipped to deal with it. You're better able to treat it. So if you are like, let's make it medical. If you put a label on it, let's say diabetes, once you put the label on it, once you're able to define it, you're better equipped to treat it. So if we are able to help our students define generational trauma and define racism and systematic racism, once they're able to define these things, then it's more likely that they again find their lane in the revolution and be better equipped to fight against it, with with whatever they're learning in their major or whatever, their contribution to the community is. So I thought that was really important.
yes, thank you. I agree. I firmly agree. I think you're freezing there, Shante. No, you're good now. um, so I think good there. I think what I wanted to, if it's okay to mention, a follow-up question to the group. We've talked about anger and rage. How have you seen anger and rage amongst your colleagues, your students, and students amongst your own classmates, and even other, faculty and staff? How have you seen rage play out, and what do you feel will help at this time? Anger is always uncomfortable to talk about. Sadness is much easier, but anger is always. If you feel in sadness, talk about that. I mean, Dima early on mentioned about grief. There is a lot of grief right now, a lot of loss. Is that what other people are feeling at this moment? What is it that you're seeing?
So I'll add to it. Hi, everyone. So
Okay.
when it comes to anger, it's not only what I'm seeing, but what I'm also experiencing is this disconnect, wanting to disconnect from a lot of things, from social media, from watching the news, from even working. Like earlier this week, I had to take a day off because of the anger that I was feeling or the frustration that I was feeling. And I've expressed this to some of you all in this chat that like it's that anger has led to disconnect, but I haven't really seen rage from my experience, and I haven't felt rage, but I felt that anger. So it's that disconnect that I'm seeing.
Thank you, Charis. Thank you. Have you sensed that from any of your students as well, or that you've been working with?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a big caseload. So the students that I'm working with, a lot of them they had to disconnect as well from classes, from, homework, whatever. They just needed to take a step back for a second and kind of gather their thoughts and everything that they were feeling. And we've had conversations after the fact. I gave them a moment and had conversations after the fact on how can we then move forward. And I'm still trying to figure it out myself, to be completely honest, but you know, helping with students, how do you move past that, turning that negative or that emotion rather into something productive and positive?
Thank you, Charis. We just got something in the chat.
Anastasia said, people are upset when organizations are silent. And that's a really valid point. Not just organizations, when their family members are silent, when their Facebook friends are silent. I I saw a Facebook friend of mine. She was very upset that she saw a lot of secular organizations that she's a member of uh, giving statements about the state of the world right now, but the church groups that she's a part of hadn't released a statement, and she was very up in arms about that. People have been saying, um, you're pro-black every other time, but now is the time for you to speak up. You're silent, and you should unfriend me, and things like that. Like, people are like being very sensitive, not only to what people are saying, but what is not being said. Um, and that's important, um, not just in general, but to LaGuardia as well. Not saying that LaGuardia hasn't done it, but we have to, as an organization, keep that in mind. People are not only taking into account what we say, what we don't say, what we do, and what we don't do um, as a community. Thank you, Anastasia.
Thank you. VP Gratian mentioned, I've seen a lot of exhaustion. Most of the rage I've seen through the news and media has been displayed by those in power, not those in protest. And that's definitely a good point. That is very true. There is a lot of anger, unfortunately, and it's mainly in a lot of leadership where we look for calm, we sense anger, and a political leadership, particularly um, in these days. And Nelvalia, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. As someone who's both a student and a workforce, I find it's difficult to speak up without being seen as unprofessional. And it leaves me not knowing how to speak about this in a way that can be taken in by everyone. My work is mainly in engineering, and my fear is this getting brushed to the side just to keep business running as usual. I've had times where people make light of other situations outside of this current one whenever we have employee training. Can you guys offer some advice? So it's a very, very good question, a very good statement. Um, I don't know, Shante, do you have anything you want to add to that, or go right ahead?
You're absolutely right. Uh, that's a challenging place to be in. Um, the first thing that comes to my mind is know your stance. And when you know your stance, that's two-pronged. If you know where you stand, then that means you're confident in your position. And so that's one prong. And the second prong is that means that you're almost unshakable. So you not only know yourself and you're comfortable with where you stand, but you aren't necessarily shaken by the views of others. Now, you could add a third prong to it if you are okay with a bit of confrontation and you can confront them and tell them, well, I don't necessarily agree with your point of view if you're up for a debate, but if you in your place of employment, you might not want to do that. So if you're steadfast and immovable in your point of view and you're concerned about theirs, and you know that might be what helps you get through that. And then afterwards, maybe talk to a close loved one, someone you trust, kind of vent and process how that experience made you feel. Um, talk about the related emotions, the thoughts that went through your head. Maybe practice some self-care, take a walk, do some exercise to let out all of that negative, all of those negative emotions of being professional.
I think, and also just to add, you are in a professional environment. It's obvious from your statement that they offer employee training around these subject matters. This is where you have a chance to advocate and voice. If you have colleagues or, if you have colleagues that are really taking this lightly and not being serious about it, you may want to speak confidentially, if you can, with whoever's in authority or whoever provides the training, letting them know that your experience and letting them know how much you appreciate the training in regards to diversity, or I'm not sure how your training is specific there, but that you don't feel your colleagues are taking it seriously, that they're walking away really not absorbing the material. This is where more can be done, and sometimes we, in larger institutions, we are required to take certain trainings regarding sexual violence, workplace violence, also diversity and inclusion trainings or cultural diversity trainings. Some people look at it as a chore. And I think getting people to understand that this is not really a chore, but for the betterment of our own growth as individuals and as part of the workforce is very important. So that, if you feel, if you notice that people are not taking it seriously at your job, it's something to bring up. It's a concern. If you feel comfortable doing it, you may not be in an environment to feel comfortable. That's understandable as well, and that's why we have the classroom. That's why LaGuardia, LaGuardia is here. LaGuardia is a safe space. As big as we are, as many students that we serve, we are an institution. We are a safe space to be able to talk about these issues. In the classroom, and not in the classroom, in groups and forums, and a lot of programs that we offer here, and even in the wellness center as well. The support circles that's being, that's currently going on, led by DEMA and the wellness and the women's center. I'm sorry. Really being able to get, there's opportunity to be able to talk about that and know that you do have some support. It's a tough situation. I think it's a tough, it's a tough situation to anybody who finds themselves in an environment where diversity may not be supported, or supported in a way as almost more of a requirement, unfortunately, just as an institutional requirement rather than a feeling or an emotion. And I think it's going back to what's been said is, this is part of the education that we have to impart to others, as educators, as students, wherever we are. The racial inequity. It's just more than speaking about it. It's not, this is something that we individuals live day in and day out and experience day in and day out. And it's very important to talk about. It's very important to understand. And it's very important to integrate in our daily lives. So, anybody else have anything they want to touch on regarding this question, topic, or follow up? You're welcome, Ms. Alia.
just something that quickly that just came up to me listening to both of you, Shantae and Regina. Thank you, and thank you for bringing it up, Nelsida. I mean, I have noticed, especially this week, kind of being in Anglo spaces where it's not brought up at all, and that lack of acknowledgement, and it feels like an exercise of privilege, and I have made a point to bring it into the room. It's like, how can we move through whatever it is you want to talk about without, like, let's just take a moment. And so it's just something that I've noticed, just sort of the silence, the absence of dialogue, and how offensive it is, or how I have felt it as offensive. And just the the challenges of maybe being in those spaces where there is silence, and breaking that. And yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that, Dima.
Hey, I don't know if you guys can hear me. This is Stephanie Sturridge from the theater.
Hi. Hi, Stephanie. How are you? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for holding this space. I really have, I really find this so helpful in many ways. Hearing the senior administration come on, and Regina and Shantae, everybody that's contributed, this is wonderful. I think the thing that I grapple with is that we say that LaGuardia is diverse, and I am questioning how our institution, what they really mean by equity and diversity, and how we are handling training of faculty and staff. And in this budget crisis, I understand we are in a massive budget crisis, but I think we have got to demand proper training and ongoing discussions, like Dean Selnev said, about this work. It can't stop. And I feel disempowered by the constant conversation of budget crisis and how that affects our students in the future. And I don't have an answer. I just want to express my anger over the need for training. And although we are a diverse institution, I don't know what that means anymore. Thank you.
Good questions. Anybody want to respond to that? Or have a comment to that?
Thank you for sharing that, Stephanie. And, the collective body, we're all, experiencing it. So, it's, even if we don't have a response, sometimes it's helpful to just get it out and know that you're being heard and that you're having a similar experience with others and that you're not like crazy. So thank you for sharing that. The theater department is not the only department that has that type of experience. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, just I think I think you're right. I think we use the idea that we're a diverse institution as a badge of honor when we have actually not done anything to make ourselves a diverse institution. We're a diverse institution because our zip code is diverse. I think that I don't think that's a fair assessment. It's that we are a diverse institution because we have done anything particularly as an institution to draw a collection of a broad, diverse set of people. I think is that we are it is more circumstance than intent on that end. And I think you're right. I think that there's work to be done for sure. We do a lot of things for segments of our diverse population. I think we can do a lot more to bridge the segments of our diverse population. I think that's where a lot of our work has been focused in trying to develop that in recent years, and I think that's something we can continue to pay attention to. It's easy to fall in the trap though of, look, we're diverse. The hard part is done. And I don't think that's where we need to be or where we want to be. So I think you raise a great point, Stephanie. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anastasia, brings in a comment, definitely the comment if it's not possible because we're in a budget freeze, makes the students feel less heard. So again, I think, thank you for bringing that question up. I think it's for statement up. I think the one thing that we all realize is that we are collectively experiencing not only COVID, but collectively experiencing the racial injustice that we're feeling right now. We're collectively experiencing possible budget freezes. It's a collective experience across faculty, staff, student, across all boards. And yes, we're diverse based on our zip code, and I think more, there's definitely more programming is needed. More programming is, whether it's student-led, faculty and staff-led, or a combination of the both. This is the beginning of the conversation, and we shouldn't let this end after today, for sure. Anastasia mentions it feels like an excuse to stop trying. I definitely I could feel your frustration there. But again, this is where we're going to hold this conversation here. One of the reasons why we wanted this forum today was to give individuals the chance to talk about this, the chance to bring up these sensitive issues and subjects, and to really move forward into something more productive and to continue to have this conversation. This will not be our last forum. We will have another forum again next week for everybody to come back and to talk again, to come up with some constructive ideas, hopefully to move this forward. Since we are at the end of our time, does anybody have any final thoughts, suggestions, anything that they want to add to the forum today?
Yeah. Hi, Regina. I just
Yes.
had one last kind of thought, and I think that this is something that we don't necessarily need to comment on, but maybe it's just something to digest and think about as we move forward, at least, which is that I really have questions around what we mean by whether LaGuardia is a safe space or not. I'd love to know more about what that means and what the school itself thinks that means and defines as safe space, and how the school is actually participating in ensuring that that's possible. I think especially given the environment that we're in right now and what we may or may not be anticipating at what point we will actually be able to be publicly back in classrooms together or physically back in classrooms with one another. My conversation with my students is very different right now because I'm looking at them through webcams. But if we are, back together and if we are on campus, like what does that mean? And how are we talking about saying like LaGuardia is a safe institution? For example, are they going to feel safe if there are police officers on campus? Are they going to feel safe if their police officers are actively recruiting for their ranks on campus? Are they going to feel safe if military people are doing the same thing? Knowing that we know these things are tied together. And these are questions I think that we need to kind of ask and think about, both from the institution, or I ask the institution to think about that. And I think we as educators that work with inside the institution need to think about these things as well.
Okay. Thank you, Beta. Appreciate that. Very excellent comments.
Beta, I just wanted to add to what you're just saying. Thank you for bringing that piece about our students, especially the criminal justice students. During one of my meetings, staff members who support our criminal justice students talked about how they were conflicted on, their career choices and what's going on out there. So I've reached out to the chair and some faculty members from criminal justice to see what it is that they're doing, what are they thinking about, what are they hearing, so that they could also be a part of the conversation, so that our students who are thinking about becoming, police officers have some type of support and understanding of what that means and what they're doing moving forward. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Sonal. Charles brings up professional staff. I would encourage you to attend the faculty and staff of color or showing up for racial justice meetings, who often hold trainings on topic of diversity and equity. However, I'd like to see more done for students. Agreed. Stephanie said I had students who wanted to join this, but the RSVP said it was sold out last night. Yeah, we got sold out at 45. We were trying to keep it small so we could have an open discussion, but then we kept increasing it. So I think that's something both Shantae and I will talk about afterwards, how to make it so that we can have more student participation. We wanted to be able to have a place so people can talk and discuss. Also put the link in RSV in the body of an email instead of a post that was hard to access. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Stephanie, for that. Anybody, any other final comments at all before we close?
I mean, hi, Virginia and Shantae, and thank you both again for putting this together for everybody, and also Dima for putting together also those support circles. Two takeaways that I get from here is that we need to educate, and then the second thing is that we can't let this stop here because this is an ongoing conversation. So what Charis mentioned about that group that meets on a regular basis, I hope that we can all continue these conversations because this is a longer conversation and it doesn't stop here. And even if there's one additional meeting next week, I think there needs to be an ongoing conversation to where we're embedding this into the culture of the institution. And at this point, in terms of what we can do for students and each other, I think is to put it out there that it's okay to feel hurt right now. And if you want to take action, here's some safe ways that you can go about taking action during this time. Because one aspect of anger and fear is disconnecting, which was said before, where some people are withdrawing because of the pain and the sadness, that they're going through. So I think just to continue putting out there to the students and to the staff on campus that there are resources here, there are supports here. You're not alone in these conversations, and that anything that we could do, we're here. And making it accessible and available on a regular, ongoing basis, I think would be great. But definitely continuing these conversations in those larger meetings that Charis brought up. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Matthew. Really appreciate those comments. And honestly, I think our next conversation, we should focus on the takeaways that we received from here today, the feelings that students have expressed, and not only and what we've experienced, but also how can we be more productive in regards to working with our students, and how can we engage more students. So thank you very, very much. VP Gratian just wrote, thank you for all your work on this. Thank you, VP Gratian, very much. And students, please talk to us. If you have concerns, if the things you'd like to see for support, please let us know. And VP gave his email, vpgratian@lagcc.cuny.edu. Definitely encourage. The VP is a great guy. Wellness centers here. Advisors, reach out to somebody to talk to them about it. Don't feel afraid. And Denise mentions, thanks for all this meeting. I really appreciate this and what everyone had to say. You're very much welcome. So we will be sending out another invite to everybody in regards to our next meeting on the WebEx link. If you have students or individuals that could not be here today because it either was closed out or timing, please let them know about our forum. And I think on behalf of myself and Dr. Shantae Bassett, Shantae, I don't know if you have any last words before we close out at all, or?
Really thankful and grateful for all of you who attended and your contributions to the discussion. I think it's laying a great foundation for our next discussion. So thank you.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, everybody. And thank you to our leadership, Dean Sonal, VP Gratian, for being here today. We greatly appreciate that. It's a very pleasant surprise, and it really brings, it really highlights the emphasis and the need to have this conversation. And we really thank you for your support for this forum today. And again, Charis, you're very welcome. Charis says thank you, and I look forward to the next one. We'll definitely send that information out towards the end of the day, so you have that. And please spread the word. We want to be able to continue this conversation. So again, thank you all, and have a great rest of the afternoon and a wonderful weekend. If there's nothing else. Thanks. Bye-bye.